meeting of the Community Police Mediation Project Planning Committee. We're at the IPM, we're all very excited to see you all here. And we're really excited to work with this great group of people to develop a project that we hope will be a real resource for the people of New Orleans and our police officers. So up first, before we get going, I just want to do a little housekeeping. We are videotaping today's event. There inside of each of your packets, there's a video release form. If you have any concerns about the use of your image, just talk to me afterwards, but otherwise, please give your consent for us to use this video to let the public know about our work. Also, the bathrooms are just out of this door to your right. Go down the hallway and they will be on your left, both the men's and ladies' room. Today's meeting will conclude at the latest at 4:30, but we hope to get you out of there sooner than later. So with no further ado, I'm going to go on and get started. Today we have a lot that we want to cover. We're going to spend a little time getting to know one another. And hi Ted. And each of you will get to meet one another if you don't already know one another. Then we're going to do a bit of presentation, letting y'all know about our background research about mediation, the visioning work that's been done up to this point, some terms of reference and procedural ideas and principles to help us work together as a group. Then at that point, we will pause for discussion between each of those items, and after which we will open up the floor for any public comment if there's any people who are not members of this committee who want to comment. And then we'll just talk about a few logistics like next meeting dates and wrap this up. I'm sorry for the mistake, the public comment period will come before logistics. So let's get started with introductions. First, let me introduce you to your project team. All of you will be doing the work of making the decisions or helping make the decisions about developing this program, but we provided some staff to help you in that work. The first staff person I'd like to introduce is Simone Levine. Simone is our Deputy Police Monitor. And I need to find my notes on all the illustrious things Simone has done. Simone first came to us from the New York State Assembly, where she was, I'm gonna find the notes. It's a lot of words. It's right here somewhere. Yeah, she came to us from the New York Attorney General, where she prosecuted public integrity cases as a Special Assistant Attorney General. She earlier worked in the New York State Assembly as Legislative Counsel and the New York State Senate, where she drafted legislation regarding ethics, police stops and searches, whistleblower protections, etc. We're very pleased to have Simone join our team here at the IPM. She's been with us since April of 2011. So she reached her anniversary just last month. And Simone is going to be sitting for the bar later this summer, so her availability is limited. She is running back up on any staff positions that we can't hold up ourselves.
Yeah, she's not stressed about that at all.
Not at this juncture.
The next person I'd like to introduce is Maya Terrence. Maya Terrence. Maya is our administrative assistant at IPM. She's a highly overqualified administrative assistant. She's an MBA and also a bachelor's. Her background is in social services and counseling. She will be our whipcracker par excellence. She will get us all on track with our deadlines and schedules and make sure we're in meetings. And if you ever have any questions about process, Maya has project management skills and she will be operating as our project manager. Next, I'd like to introduce, well, myself, I'm Ursula. I'm going to be your facilitator for most of these meetings, and I'll be the chair of our committee. So it's my responsibility to keep us on task as well, and to modify our process depending on how our decisions play out. Excuse me. We also have Astrid Bergen with us. Astrid is our resident expert. She is the woman who drafted both of those documents that you have in your packet alongside of Julio Lopez Ferrona. Astrid is a forensic psychologist and a university professor with 25 years experience in criminal justice and human services. She established and managed 7 statewide services in Australia, her home country. In particular, she managed a $20 million redevelopment of offender rehabilitation programs and corrections established 2 family violence courts, and most recently was warden of a drug treatment prison in Sydney for 5 years, working closely with the drug court. I particularly am very impressed with that. If we ever get such a thing in Louisiana, I will be turning cartwheels.
And it was a prison run on human rights smuggling.
Right. Yeah, different world altogether. But she now mostly consults with governments on broader policy issues regarding serious or high-risk offenders, and is currently reviewing community-based corrections in an Australian state. Yes. I think you're from Melbourne, yes. Yeah. There's more and more and more to say about Astrid, but she is very widely published. We're really quite grateful to have her assistance. We're off to a great start with Astrid's research and work. And finally, he is not yet in the room, but another of our project staff is Julio Lopez Verona. He is a young lawyer and with a background in mediation. He has his LLM and is a member of the bar in Puerto Rico. And Allison Curry is a volunteer who recently joined our team. Allison also is a certified mediator. She comes to us from Maryland, and she joined us here in New Orleans in 2007, but she just joined our team recently about a week ago, but we're really excited to have her as well. Now that we've done all that rundown, I'd like to take a little time out to introduce ourselves to one another. So if we could just go around the room, we'll start with Ms. Mary, and if each person could just give their name and say why they're here today and what group of people they most hope to represent and serve.
My name is Mary Luspesha. I'm a sister of the presentation. Most recently, presently I work in Central City in housing with Exodus House and Community Development Corporation with First NBC Bank. So it's kind of a really interesting mix. Most recently I was the executive director at Cafe Reconcile in Reconcile, New Orleans for 4 years. What brings me here today is just the work of Susan in your department and Chief Surpass and whatever I can do to help young people, especially young people who have had some experiences that may have a need of looking at an investigation, but also just the whole relationship.
I'm Susan Guidry, New Orleans City Council, District A.
Matt Fraser, Legislative Director for Councilmember Guidry.
Ted Plum, I'm the director of the Toomey Center for Peace and Justice here at Loyola, and I was a part of the original committee years ago that discussed the question of having a police review board and came up with the idea that we should have a independent police monitor, and was a part of the committee that to select our police monitor. I work with Council for Commission as a part of the program that we have at Loyola, and mostly working with schools and teaching children and teachers how to do conflict resolution and mediation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Deborah Cotton. I'm a 7-year plus resident of New Orleans, originally from Los Angeles. I come out of union organizing out of SEIU Healthcare Division. Here I have been working for the past 7 years in media relations. I do a lot of communications consulting for nonprofits, especially a coalition that works on open governance that's called NOCOG. I also do a lot of PR consulting for the Culture Bear community. I work with a lot of the second line clubs, brass band, and Mardi Gras Indians. So.
My name is Connie Washington. I'm a leader of Safe Street Strong Community, and my focus here today is to go to help along the youth, African American youth, in low income housing in areas.
My name is Mary Ellen Stitt. I work with Kids Rethink New Orleans Schools, working to organize young people in the public schools. I'm the restorative justice coordinator, so my interest is in alternative conflict resolution, mostly in the schools, but we're interested in seeing it in all sectors of the city.
My name is Wesley Ware. I'm the director of an organization called Breakout. We work with lesbian, gay, bisexual, and
actually primarily transgender young men in New Orleans. I've been working on getting some LGBT policies in the department and improving police and community relationships.
Hi, my name is Abigail Breakout. I'm the social worker with the Orleans Public Defender's Office.
My name is Jenny Hunter. I'm with the Business Council of New Orleans. And we're just very committed to changing the culture of crime in New Orleans, so here today to get involved.
I'm Michael Cowan with Common Good, based here at Loyola University, and we have been strong supporters of the establishment of the Office of Inspector General and supported the leadership of Laura Sanderson and James Carter and others for the establishment of the Office of Police Marshal.
I'm Cassie Pearson. I'm currently at Common Ground Relief Legal Clinic, which I coordinate 1 day a week. So the rest of the time I'm retired. I'm originally out of San Francisco. I've been here about 4 years. When I was in San Francisco, I was a staff attorney at Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. And I remember when San Francisco established their Office of Citizen Complaints, and I've always been very much geared towards mediation rather than arrest and incarceration.
Let's pause there, actually. Because I want to introduce your project board so they don't have to hump their own boards. But sitting before you are the board members, minus one, Judge Calvin Johnson will be joining us later. But these are the ultimate decision makers who will adopt the decisions that we recommend out of this committee. So each of them are going to address you individually, but I wanted to briefly introduce them. Of course, everyone recognizes our Chief of Police, Ronald Surpass. Chief Surpass has been superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department since 2010. Just previous to that position and in OPD, he was Chief of Police in Nashville. And I recently learned he's also been a professor here at Loyola Criminal Justice. Before becoming chief in Nashville, Chief Surpass was director of the Washington State Patrol for 2.5 years and has also served as a second in command to New Orleans Police Chief Richard Pennington. I would just like to personally add that he has been our reformed police chief here in New Orleans. He supported the work of the Police Monitor's Office since its inception, and he has been a strong partner in developing this mediation program and has committed to supporting it in a memorandum of understanding, but also in his 65-point plan for reforming OPD. We're also joined by Deputy Chief Arlinda Westbrook. She's Deputy Chief of Public Integrity Bureau. And she's the first civilian PIB chief in our city and one of only 3 around the country. Before taking this position with PIB, she served 10 years in the city attorney's office and 3 years as assistant executive counsel to the mayor. She's a graduate of Loyola Law School. And finally, my boss, our police monitor, Susan Hudson, who came to New Orleans in one of its most difficult times to bring her experience out of Los Angeles working with that police department's reform efforts after a long and arduous period under a consent decree. She's brought her energy and her expertise here to New Orleans to help us all develop the police department that we want and deserve. And with that, I'm going to close and let Chief Surpass welcome you all.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Very kind. It is good to be here with you today. If I could for a second, I'll hope you'll take a leap of faith with me and put a different hat on. I'm also elected by the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, 22,000 worldwide members in 100 countries. The IACP was formed in 1893. It's the oldest law enforcement executive organization on the planet. In 4 years, I'll be president of the IACP. And the question of mediation and using mediation in the outcome of police-citizen interaction and contact has been on our plate for a very long time. One of the other things I'd like to tell you that I'm incredibly proud of is that what Arlinda represents, and I think it's still this way in the larger cities, is only one of 3 cities in the nation that has determined that the best way to have the integrity units of the police department supervised is to use someone who's not been a career police officer. And those 3 cities are Seattle, Nashville, and New Orleans, and I'm proud to tell you I was chief of 2 of those cities. And we think it's important, and I think it's incredibly important that Arlinda bring to the table a different set of experiences. When she looks at cases, she's looking at them from the point of a trained litigator, not a trained police officer. She gives me uncanny and unparalleled advice, just like Kenethia Sawyer in Nashville did. When I got to Nashville, Kenethia was the internal affairs director on the level of a captain, and and then I elevated her to the level of deputy chief. And I think that's the coming trend. I think you'll see more and more police departments move to that as we go out into the future. Just like 10 years ago, we started using CPAs to run our budgets instead of police officers filling a bill if there was an open position. We now use trained professionals. I think the idea of internal affairs directors, and I certainly advocate this position as a elected representative of 22,000 police chiefs, is that we should be advocating just for this. Another really critical and important piece is you can never be an expert in your own hometown. So around the nation, these ideas are well received right now. I can tell you that they're well received. And one of the reasons they're well received is putting aside that there are some officers who shouldn't be police officers, and there are some attorneys who shouldn't be attorneys, and dentists who shouldn't be dentists, etc. The vast majority of the time we have conflict in the community, it's because of misunderstanding of roles, objectives, it's because of misunderstanding of laws, it's because of misunderstanding of procedures. And what mediation does is help us cut through all that. It just helps us sit down and let some people sit across and talk through what happened, because by and large, most police officers in America are working through incredibly complex relationships when you're at your most stressed time, and they're trying to figure out what to do against a book of laws about that big and a book of procedures that big. And most often, when we can walk through that together, we come to find out that the police officer may have misunderstood what he or she was supposed to do, but more often than not, they just weren't articulate enough in explaining why they were doing what they were doing. So mediation saves us all a tremendous amount of heartache. So I'm an absolute advocate for it. I believe in it. Kenethia and I tried to get it off the ground in Nashville, and the only thing held us up, quite honestly, and I know I'm being taped, is we couldn't find sufficient body of people who would donate their time to be mediators for us, because the city of Nashville, twice the size of New Orleans, did not have the budget in the general fund to pay for mediators. So Kenethia and I went to the bar, we went to the Luby Association, and we could not get enough people to agree to be mediators. So we really believed in it back then. I still believe in it now. And whatever we come up with, I know it's going to be better for us in the long run.
Well, hello and good afternoon. For me especially, since I'm the person that is over managing most of these disciplinary issues that come into the police department, Susan and I talked about this, but believe it or not, when Chief Surpass came in, one of the first things he charged me with was discussing and working on a mediation program. And we started that process probably well over 2 years ago, and have been having some difficulties with the unions in getting that process off the ground. So what has been great about this and expanding the exposure and the number of people that are involved is that maybe we can work together to find something that we can move forward with. Because for me, the vast majority of our cases involve professionalism. The vast majority are misunderstandings. In my tenure, we've tried it a couple of times just with bringing a citizen in, and believe it or not, some of it was very successful. Most people want the opportunity to be heard. They want the officer to hear what they felt at the time. And what I found is that as the officer expressed, at sometimes apologizing for his excitement and then also explaining what his process was, what his parameters were, it was very helpful and insightful. And most of the individuals that left, they would talk to me separate because they look at me as a non-police, and they would say, you know, I didn't think about him as just a person. And generally, it's just two people with a misunderstanding. We're not talking about the extreme misconduct. And so for me, if we can get through and deal with some of what I consider the professionalism type of complaints and some of the lower level disciplinary and training issues, and allow my office to focus on what I consider more proactive, aggressive misconduct cases, it would be tremendous in helping us moving forward in this whole process of reforming the police department. Because the vast majority of my cases, as Susan will tell you, a lot of times are this misunderstandings. Thank you.
And we've just been joined by Judge Calvin Johnson. Judge Johnson is the manager and executive director of the Metropolitan Human Services District, which is our public behavioral health agency here in Louisiana. It provides contracts, it provides directly and contracts with others to provide community-based help. Judge Johnson is a retired judge from our criminal district court here in New Orleans, and he's a recipient of the Loyola University 2009 Oz Award for service. Judge Johnson, would you like to say anything?
Well, first, I'm sorry I'm late. I was in Baton Rouge this morning. The Senate Finance Committee, of course, is in deep thought try to deal with Louisiana's recurring budget issues, which are my recurring budget issue. And so I just got back from there. But I'm just glad to be here, glad to be a part of this process. And I think, again, that we can make a difference in terms of trying to do this in a way that make the public, gives the public a better impression of what the police department is, and then specifically what the criminal justice system can be generally. So I'm happy.
Thank you, Ursula. I want to just thank my incredible staff for this. This has been a lot of hard work here. I know that they have done, so I'm very grateful to them, and thank our incredible volunteers, Julio and Astrid as well. And then Councilmember Guidry, Matt, thank you for being here. I know you're incredibly busy. And Ted, Michael, thank you. I know you helped us get this venue, so I'm really appreciative. But I thank you all for being here because this is important. When we started talking about this in 2010, when we worked together to make an agreement between our offices so that we could share information and do our jobs for the people. We looked at the ordinance, and the police monitor's ordinance says I'm supposed to create a mediation project, but it doesn't say how. And that's good, because then the field is wide open for us. But we sat down and said we do it together. But one thing we know is we can't do it together. If it's a community mediation project, it's got to be of the people, by the people, for the people. So we thank you for being here and be a part of it. All I ask is that you be creative. This is a creative and special city, and we want a creative and special program. So, and we want to hear everything you've got to put into this. So, again, thank you for being here and being a part of this. We think it is going to be something very special. You've got a tough job ahead of you. You've got to balance the department's needs to discipline its officers, the public's need to be heard, and the officers need to be treated fairly. So that's not easy. That's not easy, but we know you can do that job. So again, thank you for being here.
And civil service.
That's special all to itself.
So I'd just like to thank our project team. Some of them might not be able to stay with us for the full meeting, but we're gonna just go on and launch into our presentation about what we've done so far. And if y'all wanna scoot to the side so you can see a little better, or take some other seat, whatever makes you comfortable. Yes. Before we get started, I do want to recognize Allison Curry in the back here. I mentioned her earlier, but she is one of our project staff who's going to be helping us. And this is Julio Lopez Verona, who's done a huge amount of work on this whole project. First, the first part of the presentation, first, in your packets, you have a project blueprint drafted by Julio and Astrid along with the staff, and a review paper which goes through all the other mediation programs around the country. Due to a logistical error, you have the appendix of that review paper, but not the paper itself. So you have a chart that summarizes. And y'all feel, please take some time to digest that information.
I have it, if somebody wants to just briefly look through it real quick.
Sure.
I have a
If
copy
anyone
of
wants to
it,
take a
not
look
a
at it,
problem.
you can get it from Allison, and we will get it to you today, and we'll all digest it and be prepared to discuss it next time. We wanted to spend a little time talking about how we got here. Ted mentioned earlier that he was a member of a task force. This was a 20-member task force called by then Mayor Morial, who was mayor at a troubled time for the city of New Orleans. We had had several officers being convicted of crimes, a very sharp spike in violent crime in our area, and the mayor at that time called this task force together to develop some sort of response to citizen concerns regarding officer misconduct. This group did a great deal of work. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ted, y'all met for almost a year.
Yeah, we invited in experts from around the country and all kinds of discussions.
Yes, and they put out this really awesome paper that the main thrust of that paper was recommending that we needed independent police oversight. It also recommended that we needed to develop a mechanism for alternative dispute resolutions for minor complaints. So way back in 2002, the idea was born that the city of New Orleans needed a mediation program. Fast forward, August 2010, Chief Surpass has taken office, and he releases a 65-point plan. that focused on community policing, listening, collaborating, and responding proactively to better implement community policing throughout the neighborhood. Several of the points inside of that plan supported citizen participation and community mediation, including this callback system where they now go and talk to citizens who file police reports to make sure that they're getting satisfactory service. A citizen advisory panel that I believe is going to be up and running sometime this year. Our relationship with PIB, as well as the appointment of the civilian leader of PIB, leadership training and mediation, and job performance improvement plan that the chief can probably tell you more about, but that plan included some elements of community policing. Broadly speaking, community policing is about partnerships between community police to make public safety work better for us all. It's about a balance between reactive response and proactive response, and it's based on the idea that the people living in the community are experts on its problems and the solutions to those problems. It requires collaborative partnerships between police and citizens, a certain amount of organizational transformation to actually act in the way that complements that philosophy, and then proactive and systematic examination of identified problems, which is why we're seeing the greater use of technology as a part of the ways that NOPD is doing better in crime fighting in our city. Another piece to this puzzle is that basically, I'm not going to run all this down, but when the Department of Justice did its review of the New Orleans Police Department, it had a whole slew of findings, several of which pointed to us needing to do a better job at police-community relations. And it also said that we need to do a better job at how we handle misconduct complaints and implementing community policing. It is our argument today that mediation is one of the ways that we can address that call by Department of Justice. I think it goes without saying that there's at least a perception in our community of different communities of race and class being impacted differently. Again, there's some evidence that mediation is a way of addressing these issues of perceived bias. So when we were created in 2009, first of all, the ordinance that created us said flat out that we had to create a mediation program. And also in our memorandum of understanding with NOPD, we committed to making that mediation program happen. So in November of 2011, the first phase of this program began when Astrid and Julio, along with the IPM staff, completed the first phase of the project blueprint. We're now in phase 2, which is the pulling together of this committee. So with that, I'm going to let Julio take over and run down what he and Astrid have unearthed for us to work with.
So when we started talking about what we were going to create, we wanted to find something that was for New Orleans, but that also worked for other places, because we found a lot of mediation programs that were great, like in paper, but when you, the realization of it did not work. So we did this whole paper that really looked at Australia, looks at New York, looks at England, and what we mainly wanted to do was find, what were the answers for the world and what would be the answers for New Orleans. And with that introduction, it's just, we should start saying what's mediation, and mediation is a form of alternative dispute resolution. And what that means is that we're not going to use the formal, like the court rules for the policeman. It would be maybe having him have a complaint, and that complaint being processed, and he being in front of another policeman or some kind of tribunal, And what mediation does is that it promotes conversations. It has a third person, and that third person, the only power it has is the power to make people talk, but only if the people want to talk. So he does this process in confidence, and he looks for ways to people to start a conversation. And people decide if they want to continue in that conversation or if they don't. So what we found is that mediation in civilian complaints, it has a lot of, it brings a lot of good fruits. It improves the relationship between complainants and officers. It prevents an unpleasant experience For example, you know, for the policeman having to go through all the paperwork, but also for the civilian, because maybe he's just, you know, making a phone call, making a complaint, but that's not necessarily what he wants. So it really looks to find a way to sit down the policeman and the civilian and find the humanity in both of them. You know, look for understanding. Exactly what the chief was saying. You know, the fact that we want people to sit down and really understand what's happening and try to acknowledge and in a way apologize if it's necessary. And what we found is that in civilian complaints against the police, a lot of times policemen do apologize. A lot of times civilians apologize because they look at the policeman and they say, I know it was 5 a.m. I know you had been in a long day, and I understand that you were mad. You know, this is in a way a very balanced way of making people talk about their problem and trying to promote some understanding. So this is based in part on community policing, as Ursula said, and I think this one is repeated. But one example of community policing that's very interesting is that they, instead of having policemen have like a big area that they cover, they make them work in neighborhoods, so they know the neighbors. They establish a relationship. You know, with somebody, when something happens, the policeman feels comfortable talking to the people, and the people feel comfortable talking to them. And that's the gist of community policing. It's just making people know each other so they can treat each other humanly. But we also found that there's another philosophy that I think it's more advanced, and because Astrid is the expert on it, you should talk a little about it.
So because I do work with courts, one time there's a guy from York University that looked at the relationship between positions of authority, judges and defendants, and saw if that they treated defendants with respect and listened to their story, the person's more likely to comply with the law. So they might not agree with the outcome, but if they think the process is fair, they're more likely to comply. So I transposed that across to the prison, and I ran for 5 years, and that's how I ran the prison. And so we would even progress people back into secure detention. But if they saw that the situation was fair, they're more likely to accept it and you get less resistance. So I'm sitting here now November last year thinking, damn it, I wish Tom Tyler wrote about the police. And I thought, I'll just check. And I discovered last year he started publishing in the police area. So he's moved from courts to corrections to police. And so this is a push goal because it goes beyond community-based policing. It's really about the human interaction between police and citizens. And as long as they're explaining the process clearly to the person, there's an opportunity to complain that's more likely to lead to compliance. So they've tested that in the UK, and in Australia and Queensland at the moment, they're testing it by doing RBT, what's that, alcohol breathalyzing. You know, you can get picked up by the police and breathalyzed. They're doing the ordinary way, and they're doing a way that's using a justice-based policing process, and they're going to compare whether the drunk driver gets less revved up, if you like, because of the way the police do the interaction. So we're adding this to community policing as a stretch goal. I feel like we really need to pop it in there because it pushes the system a little bit more forward. And it was being trialled in Seattle in fall last year. They were doing training with the police on justice-based policing.
We included here a case study, but we really encourage you to see the paper because we have a lot of case studies there, and some of them are success stories, but some of them are failed stories, and I think that's important. You know, one of the things we found was that it needs to be something that fits the community, because if not, it's not going to fit. And it needs to be financed also. You know, at the end of the day, most of these programs, they are great, but there needs to be something to support it. So that's very important.
I'm just going to hesitate to stop for a moment because she wanted to ask.
So I've been a state police chief. And state police troopers figured this out a long time ago. And I don't know if y'all have heard this inside the police department. Everybody hears me go on and on about sell to stop. That's all it is. State troopers figured that out a long time ago. And as I watched them train in the academy, the basic message, taking all the varnish off, you're going to be by yourself all the time. There's not going to be 5 or 6 policemen around you anytime. And the more you use your brain, the less likely it is you're going to get hurt. So the state troopers, that's why everybody walks away. No, that's why most people walk away from a state trooper experience like, oh, that was okay. because that's what this is all about, and that's what we've been telling the New Orleans Police Department since May of 2010. Sell the stop, sell the stop. Tell people why you're doing what you're doing. They'll be less likely to be angry at you. They still may be mad, but they're not gonna be angry. That's what this is about. So my hat's off to my brethren in the state police agencies who figured this out a long time ago. And now we've got it embedded in the minds and thinking of local police officers.
So we studied the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board, and its goal was to allow civilians to resolve their complaints by means of informal conciliation. And this was going to be voluntary. We also looked at how they selected their cases, and we saw that they did it case by case, but they had some inclusion criteria. And this is going to be very important when you're discussing which kind of cases are going to be selected for mediation. They decided that they were going to have mild physical force, threats, police refusal to identify themselves, the stop and questioning of a civilian, and use of discourteous or offensive language. And they excluded everything that has to do with officer involved in 3 citizen complaints or more, because they thought that after an amount of citizen complaints, they shouldn't be mediating it. If it doesn't work, why continue doing it? Also, physical injuries, that's for them, that's a no, and that's something that we found in most of the jurisdictions. And allegations that have to do directly from an arrest.
And I'm just going to say quickly, if you haven't found this out yet, we'll be explaining it later on. You're making those decisions.
Yes.
This committee is making these decisions on what is included, what is not included.
We also found that those meetings were confidential. And this is very important. Successful mediation cannot be used in any future judicial proceeding, and the police officer's file is cleared of the mediated complaint. And that's the incentive for the policeman. And it's very interesting because you're gonna have to figure out how much are you gonna ask the policeman and how much are you gonna ask the civilian when they sit down. Do we wanna have the policeman have some kind of wardrobe? Do we wanna have the policeman do some community work? Those are the kind of questions that we need to answer. So when they evaluated the New York City Civilian Community Review Board, they found that it had expanded to 91 successful cases in 2003, and that was an increase of 20% from 2002, and an increase of almost 65% for 2001. And the complainant said that they felt listened to the mediator, that's an 87%. 88% agreed that they trusted their mediator, and most of the complainants were happy with the process. On the other side, the reasons the police officer gave for choosing that mediator said that they wanted a face-to-face, in person. They wanted to explain themselves. They felt that there was something that they should be telling. They wanted to give their story. They also wanted to avoid disciplinary penalty, of course, and they desired to increase civilian understanding of the police. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little about how this is going to work. When Astrid and I created this program, we thought that it should be very structured so it would work. Because lack of structure meant that this was going to go on forever, so we wanted to have timelines, we wanted to have dates. And the first phase is completed right now. This is the project blueprint and mediation review paper. And the second phase would be the establishment of a project board and a planning committee. We're right now in the third phase, which is the project board meetings and planning committee meetings. After that, we're going to have the project implementation, and after that, in phase 5 would be implementation. We wanted this to be ready by December 2012. We know it's a little bit asking for too much, but I think it's worth it.
So, sorry to actually come in a little too late, but I'm sorry also to burst everybody's bubble that this is going to be over in a couple of months.
some of the third persons in mediation, so that could be included.
Well, currently what happens with, if they file a complaint with PID now, the parents would come. And they would definitely always be with them, and the only restriction would be the actual complainant would have to speak to what happened, generally, but, the parents are generally there with them, so I would definitely advocate that. Yeah.
Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, this would be the time where we pause for public comment. I don't see any members of the public in the room unless Brendan has any questions or comments. No. So I think we're gonna be well ahead of schedule because the last item we have is just to talk about some logistics. The first thing I need to note is we are subject to sunshine laws. That doesn't mean a whole lot for y'all, but that means that we have to take notes and make them publicly available within a reasonable period of time. We have to provide at least 24 hours notice of our meetings to the public, but that would be for the full committee meetings. So if subcommittees wanted to gather, we wouldn't have to provide public notice about that. We have to, as I said, release any documents that are deemed public records. The 2 documents that y'all have are already publicly posted on our website, so we've so far adhered to that obligation. And let's see, we have to vote vocally according to Louisiana revised statute, blah, 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 which means we can't do secret ballots. We have to vocalize our votes. I don't know why.
Louisiana.
So the second thing I wanted to cover, I mentioned to most of y'all, but some came in late. We are recording these meetings. I've asked everyone to please sign the photo release that is inside your binder. If you have any questions or concerns about that, I will be available after this meeting to discuss that with you individually, and I can technologically redact people if need be. We also have a sign-in sheet at the front of the room. Hopefully everyone signed in because we want to circulate your contact information amongst one another so that y'all can communicate with each other. If anyone has any questions or concerns about sharing their contact information with the committee, you can speak to me privately and we'll address that. Yes. So our 2 last difficult decisions are so we are proposing that we meet in approximately 6 to 8 weeks from now. And we have some proposed dates to discuss with you. In that period, before we decide on those dates, we would like to have that period to be a comment period, i.e. a time where we can really spend some time reading and digesting our materials and having a conversation amongst ourselves about those materials. Our proposal is that we establish a Google group to be able to do that. Is anybody familiar with Google groups? Anybody? Is there anyone who is uncomfortable with that or knows of a better way to communicate with one another in the interim? Okay, since I hear no objection, I'm going to establish a Google group for this committee. Anybody opposed? Okay, so I'm hearing that as a yes. So then the next thing we need to discuss is our next meeting dates, which I thought I put in here. Give me 1 second.
I got it.
Thus far. Are there any additions to those rules and procedures? Hearing none, can we take a voice vote on adopting these rules and procedures? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so move. Next.
I just have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The videotape proceedings, will they be available to watch later?
Yes, ma'am. We want to make them available on our website. Okay. Unfortunately, we had a logistical problem today. We brought an SD card that didn't have enough time on it. So we videotaped the first hour, there was a gap, and now she's videotaping with my phone, and we'll provide all of that to everyone. But promise to do a better job in the future. Cool? I'm gonna push on forward so we can meet our deadlines if that's all right. So these principles were also Astrid and Julio helped us develop these. These are based on their research of other programs, and they're sort of a set of ideas that are meant to